Now let's take a close-up look at how to set up the framing kit for cutting mortises and tenons on miters. In the hardware kit, you're going to have 3 different sizes of the cap screws. The larger cap screws are for mounting the clamping system for the miters. The 2 shorter ones will mount the templates to the frame. The 2 longer 1032 cap screws will mount this post for cutting the tenons. Start by taking this template bracket. This is for cutting the mortises. This will be for cutting the tenons. We'll need to mount this post right in those 2 holes. Again, using the longer of the 2 screws, you'll mount this post and tighten it in place with the Allen wrenches. Now we'll take the 2 shorter cap screws, and they'll go through the template bracket here and into one of the smaller locking plates. Be sure that the PIM hardware is on the back side opposite the screw. The mortise and tenon template will now just slide onto the back rail on the front side. You can position this template anywhere along the bed. We'll just set it here in the middle for right now and lock it in place. The tailstock is in the way right now, so we'll go ahead and move it. You have 2 options. You can either simply move it to the side and get it out of the way, or if you wish, you can take it right off the machine. You'll use 4 locking plates to mount the clamp, 2 in the top rail and 2 in the bottom rail. Again, make sure that the PIM hardware is inside the rail. You can just slide the clamp back and forth to line it up with the locking plate and then put the hardware into it. We're going to leave this just loose right now for a moment. This one is set. We'll need to align the clamp with the template. We'll show you how to do that next. You'll need to mount the template follower onto the back of the router base for this step. So we'll remove the split nut and then put the template follower onto the back here and mount it with the 4 screws. You'll want the 1/2-inch diameter stylus positioned here in the very first hole on your template follower. To align the clamp, you'll want the stylus to go right inside the alignment hole here. So we'll simply slide the carriage over and drop the stylus into that hole and lock it in place. At this point, these 4 cap screws that hold this template follower onto the router base should be a little loose so that you can slide the router forward or backwards to make this final alignment. I'm going to slide this router out of the way for a moment so we can see what we're looking at. Here's the clamp for the miters, and there's an alignment hole right in the top here. We'll now position the router bit so that the center of the bit goes over that hole. So slide this back into place, dropping the stylus into the hole in the back. So at this point we can move the router forward or backwards, and we can move the clamp left to right. So we'll just do so until the center finder plugs right into that hole. Now we can go ahead and tighten these two screws here at the top and the two screws at the bottom. That secures the clamp in place. The last step is to tighten the 4 cap screws that secure the template follower plate. Now the vise is aligned to the template, so we're ready to start cutting. We still have just a little bit more setup though. The part is going to be mounted right here in the front like this. So we're going to cut a tenon. It'll be a 1/2 inch deep. We want to make sure we don't run the router bit into the top of the rails here. So we're going to use a sliding T-square, and I've set this for 7/8 of an inch from this end. We'll simply place it on the top rail right here, and then adjust this bed until it's set at that height, 7/8 of an inch. Of course, this other end has to be set to exactly the same height as well. Here are the pieces that we're going to cut the mortise and tenons on. However, I've made a couple of sample blocks just so I can use these for the setup. I'm just going to slide the carriage out of the way for a moment. We'll take our sample or our setup blocks and just position them into the clamps here on the front. Now one thing that's very critical is that the height of these two pieces is exactly the same. The easiest way to do that is to just take a blank or a block like this and put it behind here and then set them flush with that top edge. Now we know they're exactly the same height. At this point you can easily check to see exactly where the mortise is going to cut on the part to make sure it's centered. The way that you'll do that is take the stylus and of course put it into the slot that's going to cut the mortise itself. Then we'll take a 3/8 inch diameter router bit and plunge down, and we'll mark on one side. Then we'll slide the router all the way to the opposite end and mark on this edge as well. You can adjust the position of the mortise and the tenon by raising or lowering this part. If you raise the part up, it'll cut the mortise back towards the heel. If you lower it down farther, it will cut it farther towards the toe. To cut the tenon, we'll use a 1/2 inch diameter 2-flute straight cutter. Now we'll go ahead and cut the tenon using a 1/2 inch 2-flute straight cutter. The stylus is simply going to follow around this pin in the back to form the tenon on the end here. So we'll go ahead and insert the stylus, and we'll bring the router bit over, and we'll need to set the plunge depth. So we'll plunge the bit down until it just rests on the surface of the wood. Then you'll need to set the plunge depth to exactly a 1/2 inch. The easiest way to do that is to use a router bit, the shank with a 1/2 inch, and simply put that between the plunge bar and the stop. and lock it in place right there. Now you know that gap is exactly a 1/2 inch. I would recommend that you plunge down only about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch for this first cut and just relieve around the end of the tenon. Now it's easy to see the tenon in the position, so we can go ahead and set the plunge depth and cut all the way around it. We can go ahead and plunge down the full depth for this cut, and we'll want to cut around the tenon in a clockwise direction, and that will avoid tearing out the face of the surface of the wood here. Now we can go ahead and check the alignment. Now if the parts don't line up perfectly from the front to the back, you'll need to adjust the alignment of your template.